Amy, you want to say anything or you want us to ask questions?
Yes, question. I think that's probably
Okay. I'll start with one that's very, I'm sure is very easy to answer. We did set a limit on how high the item had to be. And you've got a couple things that are listed at 13,500. This is under harbors, and it's the mooring buoy replacement for 13,500. And I believe we said the cutoff was for had to be an item worth 25,000. So how are we working that so that works?
It's a little bit of a distinction in aggregate. Obviously, the project is larger. So we're
Right.
splitting it over 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, you say so, I believe it. Okay, it takes care of my questions. I can turn that on. Okay. Chris, you have any questions?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So kind of related to what we just talked about, I see that the town employee housing, the Faulkner and the Thomas properties, well, 2 aren't funded, and then the Faulkner property is not funded till 2027. Is there, given that that's been a priority, could that be moved up?
Which one? The Faulkner property?
Well, yeah, the other, and some funding for the Thomas property.
The Thomas property. Yeah, the Thomas property, the town council approved a bond. It was back in 2018. And they used part of that funding for the town manager's house. The funds left over from that particular bond,
Okay.
about $800,000. That will be used for the.
And could the Faulkner property work be done sooner than 2027?
At this point, we put it in at 2027. We had some other projects of the long-term extension bond issues that are open to vote. We have the school projects that's coming forward. 10 million for that was presented to the voters at this point. And then next year we do have the highway facility. We have the both bonds, and we try to keep it level funded instead of have peaks and valleys, and that was one of the considerations that.
Yeah, I understand there's a lot of competing priorities in these capital budgets, and I just know that that's a big priority, and it's been pushed back, like as we just discussed.
Is there anything, I have a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
Is there anything else in this capital improvement budget that perhaps has been pushed off, delayed, moved up? Because I know we don't have any indication of that on this. I don't expect, but I don't also have last year's or the year before. So my question is kind of specific to just what, maybe you know what I mean when I say kick the can down the road and other things take priority. What on here, if there is anything, kind of fell into that category?
Sure, I understand your question, and I think addressing that concern is something we hope to do better next year as the new process evolves, so that there may be some additional notations about things that moved or don't show up. In the meantime, you'll see a few lines that don't have any funding associated with the words.
Right.
And that's because, again, that process is evolving a bit. There are things that were identified in prior years that haven't necessarily resurfaced in the current year plan. And rather than striking them entirely, we want to sort of hold the concepts for a little while to make sure that we actually want to move entirely away from those projects. An example would be construct rental residence at the chief's house. That was an idea about building potentially 513 over the garage at the chief's house. There's no funding associated with it. It was in the prior plan. Let's just leave a little space, and then probably next year I'll come off and address new housing at a different time.
Right.
I think just about everything that was requested by the departments this year does actually show up on the page in one way or another. It may not be exactly the time frame that they requested it, but it's on there for discussion in one way or another.
Okay. No, that's exact. I mean, you know where I'm coming from is we've had for years a number of projects that come up and for whatever reason get delayed, and I mean, I'm happy to see things like fleet. Just the, fleet vehicle equipment on there, but when I look at 1, 2, 4 years of nothing being replaced, it's a little worrisome because I know something is gonna fill those voids, that's kind of why I asked the question too, is there were some blank spots and I figured those were placeholders.
And there are places where we're hoping as people adjust again to a new process, they get stronger at filling in the out years.
Right.
The next 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 years have much better visibility than years 5 and 6. So we're hoping that we can develop that strength so you can fill out the entirety of the plan instead of front loading.
Right, and part of it also is, at least from my perspective, being still relatively new at the town. Amy and I have met when we do the capital budget, we meet individually, each department. And there are some things on here that they didn't present. And so Amy and I started talking to them, well, how about 3 years from now, what do you think? What about 4 years? So we're starting to also get that mindset involved. With the department heads, we have new department heads in a couple of different areas. So I think over the next couple of years, some of the things will start to some of those lines going. Keep in mind, this is a living document, also it's a capital plan, so there may be something that wasn't budgeted this year or anywhere in this capital plan that may show up next year and we may put it in fiscal 24, fiscal 25. So there will be some changes, and I think it's more of a mindset that we need to get the whole time, and I think we'll get it.
Thank you.
If I could add, it's the first time we've gone through this, particularly for all of you in the audience. We've switched from a system that was very convoluted, where the planning board started in the fall and talking to the various department heads and put together a proposed budget, which would then be outdated by the time it got to the town council. So I'm very pleased that we are in the process of evolving into a different, more efficient plan. And this is our first year through it. And for several of the board members, this is their first time working with capital budget. So, we're gonna have maybe a couple little hiccups, but I can see, having done 15 years of the other way of doing it, this is much more efficient. And I'm much more comfortable with looking at the out years than I have been in the previous way of doing it, where it was a little iffy. So thank you and keep working on it. All right, Gail, you got any questions? Because this is, I think, your first time through this.
It is. No, I've looked everything over and
Okay,
I'm fine. Thank you. I had one more question.
okay, go ahead.
So I always have questions.
That's good.
Yeah. So could you describe what the $8 million in public safety is for in 2024?
It's a new highway facility. I'm sorry, new fire run.
That's a new fire barn. Fire barn.
Make yourself notes, because you will be seeing it again.
Yeah. And then the Coast Guard dock, Coast Guard Station dock, is that a public facility? Will that be used for the public use?
That's the dock at the Coast Guard.
Yes.
And that's our property.
And so what is the use going to be?
It's the harbor master building and also the Coast Guard folks to dock there, both there, right now they not, they use the red space for it.
So for a little bit of history, Christina, both the dock down there, the Coast Guard's outgrown the dock. Okay, so their boats are too big to actually dock there. It sounds absurd.
Oh, it's an old dock, and it's
It's
in
an old
lousy,
dock.
and it's in
So-
lousy
So
condition.
they've been staying over at at Champlin's, renting a slip at Champlin's, and I mean, that facility in itself is in quite a bit of disrepair, so it needs to be renovated. I think when they renovate it, they would obviously want to make it big enough so that the Coast Guard can use the dock.
Okay, so I guess
I know there was discussion on extending it and
Yeah.
having it open for public use, and I don't know where that discussion
I had
went.
no idea.
But looking at this price, I don't think it includes that.
What you see for proposed funding here is really just a stopgap and maintaining the current use, which is primarily for the Harvest Department. If we were to move towards doing additional work to accommodate the Coast Guard staying there or additional public access, again, there have been plans around that, that would require funding that's not contemplated in the plan right now. Certainly those conversations are out there, but it's not currently funded. This is really just maintaining the use as it is today.
Okay, and then, because it's my first time going through this, so is the arrangement that the Coast Guard kind of rent, we own it and they rent it from us, and they don't have any responsibility for improving the facilities, or that's all on us?
Yep, you got that one right.
Okay, and then when in going through the budget, I know you have a grants person, and so some of these items are eligible for grants or might be eligible for grants. And how do you have a process for considering, you know, if you're able to secure other funding, do you have like what can fill in those gaps if you have another funding?
We have a grant person who just resigned. Number one. Number two, funding right now, and in one particular, I am working on building appropriation funding for the federal government. That is the one at the 8th. So whenever the opportunity comes up, we can get funding to go that route.
Okay, and then you've worked out kind of like, so if you're able to fund one of these projects or more of these projects with another funding source, you know which pieces to slide in there. And okay.
Yes.
And
They've had a lot of experience doing that.
I'm sure they do.
I've seen them do it. It works
But I
very-
didn't know if they had like a formal process for
Yes.
that, or to keep those priorities and keep it fair for that all the departments are getting at least some of what they need. Yeah.
Amy, on the possible funding breakdown, when you refer to outside funding, does that include grants or what's that include? What's outside funding?
Ideally, there would be some grants there. So actually, one of the things that's not on the page would be about replacements. Typically,
You can get grants for that.
get DEM grants. We're going to fill those in just so. But in this case, specifically, the outside funding is related to the ride reimbursements.
Okay. For the school, all right.
That's the major one that we're seeing there.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Okay, there are 3 questions that we have to respond to the town manager in writing. So number 1, is this capital budget consistent with the comprehensive plan? I think we've come up with some good questions, and I think the answers to all of this is yes. Does anybody on the board disagree with that? No. Okay, the second question is, are there any relevant concerns raised during the meeting? I think we've raised them and they've been answered, so I think that we can handle it. We go to write up the report. And last, are there any additions or substitutions that we'd like to suggest for the capital budget? And again, I think they pretty much covered it, so I don't think the answer to that is there are no additions or subtractions.
Besides moving that Faulkner project up. My only recommendation.
All right. Do we need a motion on this, Jen?
Yes, I would make a motion and we'll forward it to Marianne.
Okay, I will make a motion that we find that this capital budget for this 2023 is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There were no concerns raised during the meeting, and we do not recommend any additions or subtractions to the capital budget. So do I have a second? Second. Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, both of you, for all of your efforts and your continued efforts in the next several weeks. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do 2, or rather 3 and 4 together as one section. So for the ELDS trustees, plat 14, lot 34, fire number 925, public hearing for an application for a development plan review of an application for a special use permit under sections 306E, 401, and 406 to demolish an existing single-family dwelling and rebuild a single-family dwelling. The single-family dwelling exceeds the limits set forth in section 306E.
Marky, Matthew Landry is on Zoom, if you would like him to swear anyone participating.
Okay, and number 4, again, advisory to the zoning board for an application for application for a special use permit under sections 306E, 401, and 406 to demolish an existing single-family dwelling and rebuild a single-family dwelling. The single-family dwelling exceeds the limits set forth in section 306E. Mr. Priestley?
Good afternoon. Richard and Joyce Elder before you this afternoon on an application for a special use permit to demolish their existing 3,538 square foot house and the 520 square foot dimensionally non-conforming garage, and to build a new 3,160 square foot house and a 990 square foot accessory residential structure on their lot on Coast Guard Road. The plans include a fully landscaped pool and terrace designed to fit between the two residential structures, hidden from the views of the neighbors. The L's proposal results in a 92 square foot increase in building footprint from the 4,058 square feet existing to 4,150 square feet. And the buildings are clustered together in the vicinity of the existing house. The building lot coverage is less than half the allowed 4%. The dimensionally non-conforming garage will be raised and not rebuilt. Due to the proximity in both size and location of the proposed house to the new house, the L's have already satisfied the requirements of the Coastal Resources Management Program and have received the Coastal Resources Management Council Ascent to demolish and rebuild, which is something that usually you don't see before you. You usually see a coastal preliminary determination, but not an actual assent. Their engineer, Mr. Principe, is here this evening. He can explain to you why and how they have the assent as opposed to just the preliminary determination. The L's engaged the architectural firm of Bolin, Sawinski, and Jackson of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to assist in the design of their house, which is intended to blend with the surrounding landscape in a way that honors the natural beauty of their location and of Block Island. Dennis Schofield from Bolin, Sawinski, and Jackson is here this evening, and he will explain the design to you. The L's engaged Michael Ferguson Landscape of Alexandria, Virginia, to design the landscape on the site, similarly to honor and represent the natural beauty of the island. Thomas Baker from Michael Ferguson Landscape is here this evening, and he'll discuss the landscape design. I've already mentioned Tom Principe of Principe Company, Inc. He prepared the existing and proposed conditions plans, obtained approval for a new OWTS from the Department of Environmental Management, obtained the CRMC assent, and designed erosion control plans, soil stabilization plans, and sediment control plans, all to conform to the requirements of the zoning ordinance of the town of New Shoreham and the requirements of the CRMC. He has also prepared drainage calculations which show there is no net runoff from the L's property, which would result from the demolition and construction proposed. He is here this evening and will respond to any questions that you have. Scott Hines, the L's contractor, is here this evening to discuss construction protocols with specific reference to the disposition of materials from the demolition of the existing house, as was requested by the board when we came before you for scheduling. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, Mr. and Mrs. Elder are here to discuss to listen to your comments and to answer any questions you may have. So I'd like to start with Mr. Principe.
I would just ask, I can't see Mr. Principe on the screen, but to be sworn in, if you could just raise your right hand. And assuming you are doing so, do you swear to tell the truth in this matter before the board this evening?
I do.
All right, and Mr. Principe, could you just state your name for the record again?
Yes, Tom Principe, Principe Engineering Company.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Principe, excuse me, Mr. Principe, what is your occupation?
Civil engineer.
And how long have you been practicing civil engineer in the state of Rhode Island?
About 16 years.
Does your work include site design, OWTS design, and CRMC applications and filings?
Yes.
Does it also include drainage calculations? I can move over to, okay.
Yes.
Does it also include designing and constructing erosion control systems, soil stabilization systems, and sediment control plants?
Yes.
In your work with CRMC, have you become familiar with the predicted effects of global warming and sea level rise and the effects of hurricanes on coastal properties?
Yes.
Have you worked with Mr. and Mrs. L and their architects to address all of these issues as they relate to their lot on Coast Guard Road?
Yes.
We have a series of exhibits you've been involved with in this planning process. Let me walk you through them to get them on the record. Did you prepare the existing conditions plan dated May 14, 2021, revised November 8th, 2021?
Yes.
Can we admit, are we going to admit them as applicants exhibits? The board has them all, copies of them. We have them all in the record. I don't think we need to mark them as exhibits. Did you also prepare the site plan for plat 19 lot 34, 925 Coast Guard Road dated May 14th, 2021, last revised November 8th, 2021, consisting of sheet C2, existing and proposed conditions, sheet C3, proposed site conditions, and sheet C4, erosion control, soil stabilization, and sediment control plan and drainage calculations?
Yes.
Did you prepare the plan entitled On-Site Wastewater Treatment Plan for Plat 19, Lot 34, 925 Coast Guard Road, dated April 14, 2021, and last revised August 1, 2021?
Yes.
And did you receive an OWTS construction permit for this plan?
Correct. Yes.
And all these plans and these permits we've referred to are in the records, is that correct?
That's correct.
In addition, did you prepare a site evaluation form and soil profile description to DEM as part of the OWTS application?
Yes, that was a prerequisite for the DEM permit.
Did you also file an application for a CRMC Ascent for this proper proposal?
Yes, we did.
And did you receive these?
We received it sent.
And they're both in the file as well.
Correct, and it's recorded at the town clerk's office.
Did you address the levels of sea level rise and hurricane tides with Mr. and Mrs. L?
Yes, we did. We provided a letter for the board as well.
And is that the letter dated February 21, 2022?
That's correct, yes.
Let's start with having you describe the existing site conditions, the proposed conditions, and why you were able to obtain a CRMC Ascent for the L's proposed new dwelling.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, members of the board. Just to touch base just on the CRMC portion of it, and I'd be happy to answer any more questions. But because this site has an existing dwelling on it, we're in what's called a redevelopment with a Coastal Resource Management Council. There was a gentleman by the name of Dave Reese who has been there forever. Unfortunately, he had since retired. But when we first started this project, we reached out with Mr. Reese at CRMC, explained to him what was going on and that it was a redevelopment and that we were reworking an existing dwelling here. So there's a certain policy at CRMC with redevelopment and setbacks and buffers. We had our wetland biologist go out there and delineate the coastal features. So we have two coastal features. We have one, which is the sand dune bluff on the westerly side of the property, which is the coastal side. And then along to the south, we have what's called the freshwater wetland, which is actually off the property, but was delineated by our freshwater wetlands biologist. And it determined that those are two different types of setbacks. So it was a little complex in the rules and the regulations. So working with Mr. Reese and the CRMC, we kind of brought him on board from day one, which we always do. And again, with our clients, hiring BCJ architects, we work with them to try to come up with some conceptuals on what can we do, what can't we do. Knowing the zoning regulations here on the island, the rules and regulations with CRMC, we have to blend those two together. With that said, because the project is a demo rebuild and we're not exceeding more than 100% of the existing footprint, the CRMC thought that it was suitable to submit for a permit itself rather than submit for a PD. Sometimes the board looks at a PD, which is preliminary determination. That is just the CRMC spitting out the same regulations. They don't really give you an indication on the project if it'll go through or not. So again, working very closely with Mr. Reese, BCJ, and our wetlands biologist and our team in our office, we're able to come up with something that I think kind of hit all the checkpoints and the CRMC was able to issue an actual permit for, which again, once CRMC issues a permit, which is called an Ascent, that's the term that they use, that gets recorded down at the town clerk's office, which I believe was already recorded by our client.
So is it fair to say that because you're rebuilding in an already disturbed location and not significantly expanding the size of the existing structure, that the CRMC would rule on it prior to, has already ruled on it?
That's correct, yes. Yep.
And could you please walk the board briefly through the existing plan and the proposed plan?
Yeah, so in terms of the existing and the proposed plan, again, we have our architect here that will kind of elaborate more on the house design itself. I won't get into that, but again, it's a very modest existing dwelling that's on the property now. A majority of the site is cleared. It's existing lawn with a septic system, but as we stated earlier this evening, we did do soil testing that was approved and reviewed by the DEM. We do have an approved on-site wastewater treatment system to service 6 bedrooms that was reviewed and approved by the DEM. That permit is on file and for the board itself. As part of the permit process for CRMC, going back to them, but also the DEM and the town process with soil erosion control, stabilization, and drainage. You know, drainage is a very big topic here in the state of Rhode Island. We cannot increase any sort of runoff from any sort of project, whether we're starting from scratch or we're doing a redevelopment. So since this is a redevelopment, what we did is we analyzed the overall watershed and runoff and determined how much volume we would need to capture, treat, and recharge that excess stormwater runoff, which is applied to the plan and was reviewed by both DEM and CRMC to comply with their state standards. So.
I know you discussed projected sea level rise and hurricane tides with the L's. Would you explain to the board their effects on this project?
So again, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Again, it is a coastal property. So a lot of these coastal properties, when we deal with CRMC, one of their biggest comments is how are we treating sea level rise? So again, it's not an exact science. There's a kind of a theoretical formula that they have for sea level rise and projections. But one of the things that we kind of issued in our letter as well is, you know, it's important to note that we are outside of the flood zone and that we are at, I believe, elevation 40, I believe is a contour where we are. So we're well above 15 plus feet above any sort of flood zone. So when you do the projections for sea level rise, I mean, we're pretty far out of that area.
And will the effects of sea level rise and hurricanes on this house be essentially the same as they would be on the existing house anyways?
Absolutely, yes.
Could you briefly describe the OWTS that you designed and that was approved?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the OWTS that was designed, and again, we design a lot of OWTSs here on the island, and a lot of them are becoming those pre-treatment systems, those little fiberglass boxes. They're called Aranco AX20 treatment systems. The leaching field that we designed is a geomat. So a geomat is a shallow, pressurized, narrow field that sits just below the grass. And what's good about these types of systems is they denitrify the wastewater. So there is no contaminants that get into the groundwater itself, being close to the coastal body, the freshwater wetland, and having all private drinking water wells within the area. So that was the type of system we designed. It has a smaller footprint. There are 4 trenches, if you will, or 4 lines, but those are all pressurized and they're underneath the ground, but that's goes through a treatment system to denitrify the wastewater prior to discharging to the leaching field itself. So it's one of those high-tech, innovative systems. We could have went more conventional, but again, you know, being sensitive to the environment, having a small footprint, having that denitrification component was kind of key in the overall environmental permitting of this.
And just to repeat, that has been approved by both DEM and CRMC.
That's correct. Yeah.
Could you describe the erosion control plan that you have for the property?
Yeah, so as far as erosion control plan, again, the soil stabilization, a lot of the area that's already disturbed is going to remain disturbed. So that's a key point. A lot of it is already lawn and disturbed. So we're working within the disturbed area, but around the limits of the work is going to have soil stabilization. Again, we have a landscape architect. Maybe he could kind of elaborate on some of those elements that we're going to apply for construction. But we'll have our typical construction entrance, our silt fence and our compost sock to prevent any sort of erosion issues, but more so long-term is what we're considered as well, which our landscape architect can kind of elaborate on.
And can you describe also the soil stabilization and sediment control plan, or should I leave that to the landscape architect?
Yeah.
Okay. How about your drainage calculations for the property?
Yeah, so the drainage calculations, again, like I kind of touched base earlier, is the net crease and runoff. So what we've designed, and again, with our landscape architect here this evening, he has a phenomenal landscape plan here. We have what's called the typical rain garden, and I'm sure you guys are more familiar with the quote-unquote rain garden. I mean, it's a great option here because we have the landscape architect involved. What he can do is kind of blend in those rain garden plantings in with his overall landscape design itself. And it meets all the checklist items and the minimum requirements for the CRMC. But Thomas and I had a little conversation earlier this evening, and he can touch base on it this evening. But we were already trying to coordinate how we can kind of blend in our drainage rain garden with his plantings as well. So it's an important element.
I have no further questions for Mr. Principe.
Anybody on the board have questions? Not yet.
I do have questions, but I can hold them until the end if you want to continue.
It's up to you. It's up to you. If it's fresh in your head, I can answer it.
You know, why don't we do it on the end? 'Cause
Okay,
they might
sure.
answer
Some of them
Jot it
will
down.
answer it as we go along.
Yeah.
My next witness is Dennis Schofield.
Thank you for having us tonight.
Sworn.
Oh,
Because they have it, I believe.
Hey, thank you, sir. If you could raise your right hand, please.
Sure.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter before the board this evening?
I do.
And just state your name for the record, please.
Dennis Schofield, Bolin, Swinsky, Jackson.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Schofield, what is your occupation?
I'm an architect with the firm Bolin, Swinsky, Jackson.
And how long have you practiced architecture?
I've been practicing for 24 years and I've been licensed for 17 years.
And what is the nature of your work with the firm?
We're general practitioners. We do a wide range of work, but I specialize in single-family residential.
And Mr. and Mrs. Zell engaged you to do the work we're talking about this evening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you please explain for the board how Mr. and Mrs. L approached the project with you?
From the outset, they explained that they've been residents of the island or been on the island for about 40 years. And it was very important to be kind of sympathetic and appropriate to the architectural context of the island and this neighborhood in particular, but also do something that's sympathetic to the neighborhood and the neighbors around them.
And did your planning and work with them ultimately result in plans described as Eld residence dated November 18th, 2021, consisting of 20 sheets?
For the most part, yes.
And the board has those plans. Since they've been submitted to the board, have you modified them slightly?
We have modified them slightly, yes.
Do the modifications increase the living space or any dimensions or heights shown on the original drawings?
No.
What are the changes?
We've added dormers that bring some light into the house on one of the structures.
Is that on the west side of the main house structure?
The west and the east side, yes.
And do these revisions result in changes to sheets A14, A20, A21, A22, AR10, and AR20 before the board?
Correct, yes.
Jen, I have 10 copies of those changes for you. I'll give them to you now. And one for each of the board member, 3 for you.
Okay.
I didn't want to carry 30, so I'll get those to you next year.
Yeah, that's fine. I will, they only, I think they only need 4. So this is there. just send it PDF.
Yeah. I have a file to give you, but I'll send it separately for Could you walk the board through the house design by reference to your plans? And I can give you a copy of this.
Yeah, because we have not seen these before, so you're gonna have to be very specific. Normally like to have stuff ahead of time to look at.
These are only a minor change.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand that. That's why I'm letting it go through, Joe.
Thank you. The plans, why don't you walk the way through?
Okay. Do you want me to talk about the change or just generally?
The overall design.
Overall design, and then tell us what the changes are, because we've looked at the overall design.
Okay,
That's to kind of walk us through that and then point out where your changes are in case we're not smart enough to see it.
my pleasure. So as referenced, two of the major things that we were looking to do when we came into the project were to do something that's sympathetic to the architecture of Block Island and coastal New England, and do something that's sympathetic to this specific neighborhood. And if you look at sheet AS 2.0, I'll pull this up for everybody here. We kind of dialed in and worked really hard at making sure we were placing the building in a way that was preserving all of the existing view corridors of the surrounding neighbors. And happy to share this in more detail. And so we sort of nestled the house down into the site, and it kind of worked to blend it into the landscape around the project. As far as the size, the scale, the massing, we took the program elements and broke them up into individual pieces and did a series of discrete buildings with vernacular gable-shaped boxes. Again, bring down the scale of the project, bring down the massing of the project. Materially, we're using familiar kind of materials and methods of installation. Cedar shake siding throughout all three buildings. Punched openings with divided lights that are kind of familiar as you go around the island. We're using kind of a muddle stone wall, muddle stone masonry construction for the fireplace. And just, again, things that are kind of familiar around here. And kind of sending or siting the house within kind of a nice landscape of natural stone walls, and just trying to, we're looking at this as kind of a reclamation project and designing something that feels like it's been there for a long time.
Besides the neighborhood views, which you have already addressed, what type of views are there for the public to this property from Coast Guard Road?
The house is from Coast Guard Road. There'll be an elevation of the pool house as you sort of come perpendicular to the property, but as you come down Coast Guard Road, the view corridors are generally the same.
Where is the principal view of this house going to be from? Is the principal view going to be from the west, from the water?
Correct, yes.
And could you please describe that view to the board?
Sure. So at the end of the package are the renderings we've done that kind of give you a sense of the character and the materials. And on AR 2.0, what we've done is kind of photo montaged the new house design where the existing house is. And you see we're using more vernacular shapes, and we've really worked to kind of nestle the house into the hill there, and kind of demonstrate that the visual impact is similar to what's there at the moment, but with I think a building that harks on the architecture of coastal New England.
And actually, you began this project before last summer, when the rules and regulations addressing this type of building were amended by the zoning board. By the planning board? Is that correct?
Correct. We started the project in December of 2020. We're working on initial design concepts and to the point where Rich and Joyce are concerned about trying not to do too much. The house that we've designed was not affected by the kind of narrowing down of the requirements of the ordinances.
So you didn't try to build, or even from the start, you never tried to build to the limits of the ordinance, is that correct?
There was no redesign required based on the change of the ordinances.
And you're still not only conform, but are slightly smaller than what would be allowed under section 514, is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the house you designed satisfy all the performance standards set out in section 514?
Yes.
And did you direct William Luce, AIA, to provide a livable area calculation for the house and the accessory residential structure?
Yes.
That's in the records, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it conforms to the ordinance requirements?
It does.
I have no further questions for Mr. Schofield. The next witness is Thomas Baker.
I forgot to tell you about the dormer change. I'm sorry. So I think, yeah, here in AR 1.0 is probably the easiest place to see it, where we've done a linear dormer that we believe does two things. It sort of breaks up the mass of that roof, that east and west facing roof, and it brings nice light into the center of that space.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm challenged when it comes to figuring out cubic square feet. And does that change the cubic square feet? Because I noticed.
You are correct. It does change the cubic
And
square
it doesn't
feet.
exceed the 65,000?
No, we're quite a bit under there, yeah.
My next witness is Thomas Baker.
How is everybody doing?
I think they need to.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Baker, if you could just raise your right hand. Thank you, sir. Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter before the board this evening?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just again state your name for the record.
Thomas Baker, Michael Ferguson, Landscape Architects.
Thank you.
So you're a professional landscape architect? And how long have you practiced landscape architecture?
7 years.
And you work with Boland, Sawinski, and Jackson and the L's to design the landscape for this property?
Yes.
And you prepare the landscape plans dated November 18, 2021, consisting of sheet L1 landscape plan, L2 precedents, and L3 history and site walls that are in the record?
Yes, I did.
Would you please describe the landscape plan to the board, and while you're at it, address the runoff and erosion control proposals that Mr. Principe referred to?
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Oh, I gotta use the mic. Okay. So Boland, Sawinski, Jackson and our firm have worked together since 1990 on an array of projects. So we collaborate really well together, both residential in this area and commercial. They brought us on, as we said, and early on in the project to discuss kind of the site topography. On sheet L1, you'll see two plans. One is a kind of a detailed plan and one is an overview. It is very similar to what Mr. Principe showed us, but it is more illustrative. What it does show is the extent of existing vegetation that is to remain. So everywhere you see a number 5 on this plan on L1, that is all existing to remain kind of shrub vegetation. As it was said earlier, we are only, oh, you don't have an L1?
No.
Oh.
Might be it's on the bigger one though.
Yeah, it's on the bigger one.
This is the bigger one.
I saw it earlier.
Okay.
It is not in that package.
It's on the package you gave us.
It's separate from that package.
It's in the big package.
Shouldn't be in the package.
It's on the bigger one.
Okay, that I did not bring in. I'll just watch that.
Help if I come closer.
Yes, that would be very nice, because I did not bring that with me.
I can stay over here if you just want to show them.
Yeah.
So the overall design concept was to maintain a quiet presence and really celebrate the site as it is. We are using the existing driveway entrance along Coast Guard Road in order to not have to cut a new driveway. There's a lot of grading to be done with that. So we thought it was best to keep the existing driveway. As you approach the site, you arrive at an entry court that's a gravel that's on the eastern side of the house. That is more of a garden-like entranceway. We're seeing that as being the area that is perhaps more garden-like in its expression and plant composition. We have a series of low stone walls that terrace down to a pool house at the 34 elevation, so 4 feet down to a pool terrace that is going to be stone, reclaimed granite stone that is characteristic of the area. And on the western side, we are preserving the view, and we're just replacing a simple lawn to kind of not distract from the natural beauty of Block Island. So everything we're trying to do kind of honors the site, focuses on site repair and putting back appropriate native plants that are well adapted to this coastal site. We have good sandy loam soils that are really good for gardening. So we're going to stockpile the topsoil on site and reuse that when we put back and repair the lawn. I think that's a good overall.
How do your plantings tie into the drainage systems that
Oh yeah, so we have two stormwater management or rain garden facilities. They're very.
Where are those on there?
They are just south of right here to the south part of the house, and also on the eastern side of the pool house. We've really worked to kind of sculpt them in a way that they're a low depression that capture the rainwater from the roof and from the project. But basically we sited them there so that they would blend in with the shrub vegetation. And the plan is to put back native plants and all the shrub areas kind of that blend in that zone. There's a fair amount of tree preservation that we're going to do on the eastern side and along Coast Guard Road. So again, just to preserve the natural vegetation that's been kind of a key. So
If you don't, the weather will take care of the rest.
exactly, yeah.
I have no further questions for Mr. Baker this time.
Anybody else got questions?
The retaining walls, the dimensions or detail on that?
We actually presented a letter giving us the retaining wall.
We did.
From Michael Brutus and a letter dated March 3rd, 2022.
Correct.
And that has a detailing of it attached to it with two sheets.
It does, yeah.
I don't.
I have a copy of it. Okay.
You have the dimensions, you know what the dimensions are?
I think it's the wall is 11 feet tall, but it's 33 feet long.
And is it also, does it also?
It's associated with a walkout basement. So is our understanding that it's in compliance. It's a thickened stone veneer wall to reflect kind of a semi-dry laid. So on all the walls in the project, we're using a locally sourced stone that carefully reflects the color and the expression of all the, the classic Block Island wall. It is our intent to put a small plant bed at the base of that wall and perhaps grow a vine or two over top of it.
I have a question
Yeah.
about the rain gardens. When they're right up against the shrubs,
Mhm.
thickets, if the rain garden gets totally consumed by the Block Island growth, doesn't that affect the quality of the rain garden to do its job?
I mean, they would be maintained. I mean, I think that the Block Island growth would have to be so like if there's no maintenance, yes, the woody shrubs will come in. the rain gardens will be designed to be cut or bush hogged once a year, I would imagine.
Okay. Because
Does
the
that
way
answer your
they look,
question?
they're like almost into the bushes and,
Yeah.
you know, that wouldn't last, like you wouldn't be able to go around the other side of the rain garden to maintain it.
Well, I think you would, I mean, I think you would want shrubs on the shrub side, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we would go all the way around them.
Just so you can get in there.
If you can get in there, yeah, it's accessible on three sides, just not one.
Thank you. And my last witness is Scott Hines to address the construction protocols and disposition of remains. You need to be sworn.
Hi, Mr. Hines, do you swear to tell the truth in this matter before the board this evening? And just state your name for the record, please. Thank you.
Are you a contractor?
Yes, I am.
And you've been contracting on Long Island for several years.
A few.
And you consulted with the Alps in the design of this project
Yes, I have.
and also the demolition of the existing house.
Yes.
To explain to the board how you intend to manage the demolition remains, how you get rid of them.
Okay, the two buildings are constructed of CMU cement blocks that are hollow core with wood on each side. So during demolition, there's no way to pick through the stone itself, the cement. So that's going to go to the Block Island Recycle Management, and the footings and the slabs will go to Sprague Farm to be recycled.
And you prepared a letter for the board.
Yes.
On March 18th related to this, did you not?
Yes.
You have that one, Jen? I thought I put that one to you.
That's why I sent you an email today asking.
Is this your letter?
Yes, it is.
So basically, you got a plan that works to get rid of the materials from the house, yeah. Unless anybody else has any questions, which I have no further questions for him.
What's your estimate on how much material that is that's going to Block Island Recycling?
I think Mike Ernst and I figured around, it's not the whole, there's an addition on, that was put on in the 90s. So the part that'll all, as there's no cement in that part, it just except a slab, but I think we figured around 4 30-yard dumpsters, which is typical.
Typical of a house that's built from cinder blocks?
Well, it's going to be either cinder block or studs, so.
Yeah, right.
One thought, what are you gonna do with the appliances and coverage and stuff like that?
I think we're going to,
Recycling that for people who are using it?
I think we're going to, I believe we're going to advertise on the Block Island Bulletin for it.
Right answer.
And Mr. and Mrs. Eld are here and happy to answer any questions you may have.
We're glad you're here, and we'll start with anybody have questions here on the board, and then we'll go to the audience. Why I asked, you said you had a couple questions.
I do. I'd like to know a little bit more about the treatment system. So what is it? How does it denitrogenize?
Oh, treatment system?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sure, again, what happens is that there's a textile filter. We have a primary treatment, which is your conventional septic tank. So that's your concrete septic tank. It's a 2-compartment septic tank that settles out all the solids. Then there's an inline filter in there that then discharges to our secondary treatment, which is the pre-treatment that I was referencing earlier this evening. That is composed of pumps and textile filters that circulates the wastewater and then also recirculates it back into the primary septic tank to go through another round of treatment. So with that anaerobic bacteria coming through with the pump and going through the textile filter, after it goes back through the treatment train, once again, it then gravities to a pump chamber that then discharges it to a leaching trench, which sits on a bed of sand then further treats the wastewater. But technically, the effluent coming out of that treatment system meets EPA standards for irrigation. I wouldn't drink it, but it's clear, odorless fluid if you were to take a tap out of it and put it in a bottle. So it's very clean. So that's why the actual footprint of this leaching field. So this is a 6-bedroom design. If we were to do a conventional pipe and stone design, Elgin in-drain design that you used to see in the 90s and 80s, it would be 3 times the size of that. So they've allowed us to kind of shrink the overall leaching area as well. But not only that, but it's good for the recharge, it's good for the environment, it's good for the water quality. So.
And this is the latest technology in
That's
denitrification, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, and this is one of the better ones. We do a lot around the state of Rhode Island, and this is Aranco. The brand is Aranco, and they've been around forever. So a really good brand. What happens is once we install this, I think Mike's going to install this. Mike Ernst is going to install this. It's going to get inspected by us in the state, and I think the building official also inspects it. But there's an operation and maintenance agreement because just like anything else, you talked about drainage and rain gardens. Your septic systems, everybody here on the island, you can't just put it in the ground and forget about it. Maintenance is big, but the state DEM mandates you to file an operation and maintenance agreement. So every 6 months, someone has to come out and just make sure it's working, double check everything, check the pumps and the filters. And it's just good overall longevity of the system. But again, to make sure it's operating efficiently. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, quickly.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask about, in the beginning, you spoke about the CRMC Ascent. And so did that, because this is my 4th year, I guess, of doing it, and I haven't seen it before, and I've always seen the preliminary and always understood that CRMC wanted to have local input. So there was no local input at all on that approval?
That's fine. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So again, we do this stuff all over the state of Rhode Island, and again, CRMC is a big aspect, especially on the island. So local input is required. So we were working with the local building official on the overall design, like I indicated earlier this evening. We were working hard with Dave Reese at CRMC, obviously our team, wetlands biologists, and our BCJ architect team to try to come up with all of the items that meet the CRMC requirements and obviously the town zoning requirements. So yes, so local building official was involved in that conversation. He didn't see any issues from a zoning standpoint of view on our lot coverages, our setbacks. Again, we have to meet all these regulatory agencies and all these checklist items for, again, CRMC has their own set of rules, as we know, DEM has their own set of rules, and Town of New Shoreham has their own set of rules. So those 3 agencies, and again, whenever we get a new project like this, and it's a redevelopment, like I indicated earlier, you know, we take out the book and we see how we can kind of balance this whole project and try to meet all those checklist items. So dealing with the town building official and CRMC, you know, they were fairly confident that, you know, they could issue the permit. Now, the permit isn't saying, it's not just to tell the town that, hey, we can go build this house. Obviously, we have to go through this process. We still have to file for a building permit. We still have to go to zoning. So in the event that the board doesn't vote in favor of it, then, you know, we might have to modify the plan and go back for a modification on the CRMC permit. But this just gives us an indication that, you know, rather than having a preliminary determination, and again, just being in the business on the engineering side, a preliminary determination doesn't really tell my clients that they can do it or they can't. A preliminary determination gives us the rules, and we already know the rules. We've already worked with the agency. That wasn't good enough for me and for me personally, and to consult my client. So we wanted to make sure we could go to the next step and actually have that permit in hand.
Well, I've seen lots of different preliminary determinations. Yeah, sometimes it says different types of setbacks, and sometimes it says we can't give that many variances.
Yep,
So
yep.
it does give you some information.
And I've had CRMC tell me on some other projects, because sometimes it goes to different consultants and it just lingers for a few years. And some CRMC agents tell me, please don't submit another PD. Please don't, because it's just going to review it again, review the same thing, and it's going to be the same regulatory response, you know? So that's how come we landed with our permit, so.
And then, this is my last question. Is there any plans for outdoor lighting? It wasn't in the landscape plan.
Good question.
Yeah, we've done some preliminary.
Please go to mic, one of both of you.
Yeah, there are plans for landscape lighting. We haven't fully fleshed those out at this point.
But I think the approach is minimal path lighting, so you know how you're getting from A to Z. And some wall sconces at the entries, but it's going to be a very minimal approach to how we treat the site.
And it will comply with the shore dark sky ordinances and lighting ordinances.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Good, because we had some problems with some other homes, and so that was one of my questions, was what we could do with lighting, because that is a concern, particularly around the pool area with open large windows and so forth. So there will be definitely some light pollution, so keep it to the minimum. That would be
Absolutely.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Okay.
I just had one quick question about, and I don't know if I saw this correctly, but it looked like there might have been a kitchenette in the pool house maybe. And we should assume there aren't going to be cooking facilities in there because that would be a second kitchen. Is it just an open
Correct.
area for gathering and what have you?
Right. Ice
And
maker.
stoves and,
Yeah. Correct.
okay.
I don't have any questions. I hope they're all this thorough.
Yeah.
Not with you guys.
Yeah.
Look at this, I'm like, I don't have any questions.
Very good presentation.
I think it's a very good presentation. I like the architecture, I like the attention to getting to island character, material, color. Like, compare the old to the new, I'm looking at each, that's the first thing I noticed is it kind of blends in as opposed to a lot of white trim around windows. Eaves and things like that, so.
My question was the lighting, which you've already addressed, and while I have it here, we did get one letter saying that this is from Redwood Treaty, I have no objection to the Eldridge plan or location. My only concern is from whence the water to fill the pool will be obtained. We have had problems in the past during dry summers when our well running dry, and I question the wisdom of putting such additional demand on the local aquifer. I thought you might just want to touch on an answer for that.
If we will, we are gonna use one of the fire hydrants on the Corneck Road and bring in, truck in water from that
For the pool.
For the pool.
for the pool.
Yeah, well, I just thought that since we had received this, it needs A, to go on the record, and B, to have an answer.
Yeah.
Can I
Yes, you may.
have
Can we put the microphone if you would, please?
swear in?
I don't know, since you're Jen is.
Matt, do you want to swear the next?
He's the owner, so I'm not sure he has to be sworn in.
Yeah, it's not a witness, it's the applicant. But for consistency's sake, I'm happy to swear them in. I don't think it's necessary.
I swear I'll tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
I think the water is, and by the way, Pete asked us that too. So we've been on the island we've lived on the island for 22 years, or had a place on the island for 22 years. We've been coming out here for close to 35, 40 years. We're very sensitive to the island. And I want to make that statement just to the group and to our neighbors as well. So much so that when we built our first house, this is a long answer to the question, I hope it's okay. When we built our first house, we had some great views. And within 2 years, those views were gone. So we're very sensitive to view corridors. So that's number one. Number two, we're very sensitive to water because everything's on well water out here. And in fact, our first house, we put an entire system to water. And then within 2 weeks, I said, why did we do that? We're on well water. So we never used that in 22 years. So we will get water either off, we'll bring it on from where we can get it, or we will actually ship it on through a shipping container and bring it on. But we will not be using the local water in terms of the well water around our local home, for sure.
You mean you'll be shipping in drinking water?
Pool water. No, this is pool water.
Yeah.
We're
Because-
talking about how are we gonna get the water into the pool?
I'm talking about the pool, the rest of it.
Yeah, because it's a lot of water. And so you gotta be sensitive to the water and so where that comes from. So we'll make sure that we're not draining the aquifer, the local aquifer, for all our sakes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Allison, have you got questions?
Well, I think we just want to clarify the retaining wall. I brought this up last meeting and this meeting. The reason is because within 306E, there's those dimensions for the retaining wall above which, so that's going to be part of your special use permit. So I just want to clarify that. It wasn't technically listed within the application. It's on your site plan, but maybe just, I want to make sure that's covered and it's clear.
And I think,
That's part of the special.
and I think 306E excludes retaining walls that are connected to a walkout basement. So I think you'll find that.
But it's
We'll get
11
clarification on that.
by 30 and there's an existing retaining wall on the property that was what, is that true? The application talks about existing retaining wall of 52. The 52 square foot footprint. It's, or unless that was.
Yeah, so if you were to look at the property essentially does this. It sits on the top of a hill and does this. And so we've designed everything to use the topography to bring down the profile of the house. On the left-hand side, because it's lower, we're actually bringing in the cars to that lower area. That's a garage and a walkout basement. When you do that, you basically, the hill goes like this. So when you build that, you have to have a retaining wall. So that's the wall that's being discussed there.
Is there anything?
Yes. There is an existing, it's not that wall, but there is an existing.
Yeah, so actually, this plan might be pretty good, and this is for the record, this is C3 on the civil side. So this is the aerial underlay showing the existing condition, the existing footprint, and then over the top of that is showing what's proposed. So you have to look hard, but there's a retaining wall, and again, there's a walkout on that south side, which is the bottom of the page. So the existing retaining wall, you can see my finger down here, it's almost generally in the same location, not really, but here's the existing retaining wall that we're talking about, and then here's the new retaining wall. So it's essentially it's in the same general vicinity of the existing retaining wall.
You
That's
don't-
what you're shifting.
It's just not listed on your zoning application. You might want to include that on there.
By the way, aesthetically, we recognize it's probably a bigger wall. And we're planning on putting plants there to soften that. So aesthetically, it won't be just a wall. Aesthetically, you'll see plantings there.
The existing wall,
Okay.
the existing wall that he's pointing out is close to 50 feet long, if I remember correctly. It's a bare exposed concrete wall, so we're actually improving the materials by doing the thick and thin here.
So.
Anything else, Allison or Jen?
No, it's just a retaining wall.
Okay, we can make a note of that in our findings. Absolutely. Okay, any questions from the audience? Go ahead.
Can I make a statement?
Yes, you may, please use the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
She needs
Do I need
to-
to be sworn in?
No, you're.
Get off me, so my name's,
State your name, please.
sure, my name is Diane Boston. I'm next door neighbor to the Elds on the south side. And I guess my background's in architecture, so, I did some studying in the drawings and I'm just gonna read a brief statement I've made here. So it's my understanding that the purpose of this meeting is to determine whether or not the planning board believes that this project complements the island character as per section 406 of the new Shoreham comprehensive plan. And in my opinion, in order to properly assess the project, I believe that the drawings submit with this application could maybe more clearly describe the new house, especially with regard to the height and the scale. We're seeing a lot of plan conversation. And I think I just want to make absolutely sure there's an understanding of the height and the scale and the volume of the house. it seemed in the application that a waiver had been given for for a model, a site model, as well as a model of the building. And in lieu of that, 3-dimensional drawings were provided. And there are 7 3-dimensional drawings, which is great, but only one is shown side by side as we discussed with the existing house. So it just seems to me that a better understanding of the project could be had with more 3-dimensional drawings. Just conversations with the Andersons too. I think a layperson has a hard time and understanding the volume of the building as it's going to appear. So I just wondered if there could potentially be more 3-dimensional drawings shown side by side with what's existing, just to give everybody a better understanding of what the project's going to be. I feel that there should be no questions when this is all done, when you all are driving down Coast Guard Road and the house is built, that it's exactly what you thought it would be. And I'm just a little concerned that that's not as clear in the package as it could be. So that was the first comment I wanted to make. And then the second was with regard, kind of going back, and this I might not fully understand what's required, but also waived for this application was a natural conditions analysis. And I just wanted to question why that was waived. And it seems there's very thorough analysis of the existing site and the natural conditions, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was covered with regard to that. And big picture, I mean, I appreciate all the effort that's been gone to try to build something natural into the site and really bring natural materials to this project. But I'm a little bit just concerned about the volume and height, and I feel that that's a little bit challenging to assess properly. I'd like to see a little more comparison with the existing house in terms of that understanding.
I can't address that issue, but I can address the natural conditions analysis. In days gone by, the Rhode Island Natural Heritage Program used to provide what was called a natural conditions analysis. And that's what's required. That's what's set forth on the checklist in the statement. Some years ago, they stopped providing them. So it's not possible even to obtain them anymore. So it really should be removed from the checklist, but it's regularly waived just because you can't get them. And I think that Mr. Schofield can perhaps address the height issue and the volume issue.
Yeah, thanks for the comments. Regarding the height, we did a comparison drawing from where we had access to physically. And so we were able to do our comparison of the existing building to the new from down from the beach. The height, I think we've demonstrated the height in all the building elevations where we're calling out the allowable versus what we've built to. And I think we're something like 4 feet under allowable or 5 feet under allowable. I forget what it is.
I actually wrote that down. I had 2711 and you're allowed 32.
Right. So that's the best place where we can kind of provide tangible kind of analysis of the heights versus a rendering where, they're taken from a point in space where you can't pull a dimension string. So I'd say as far as a technical evaluation, the elevations will provide that. As far as volume, we've built a Revit model, we've built a 3-dimensional model that we're working from, and we've done the cubic foot calculations from that model, from the outside envelope. And I think we're a good 5,000 cubic feet within the limits that are allowed within the articles and sections, so.
Yeah, we had it on our plans, Diane. I don't know if you're privy to those that we were given. Yeah, they have the heights of the
I took a look
structures.
at those. Yeah, and you're correct that the average height is 27. On the side that faces our property, it's almost 32, where it's the lowest point and highest, and the high point of that roof, because it's an average grade.
Right.
So, but they, at no point are they over that 32, but nonetheless. But again, I just feel like an understanding of a 3-dimensional understanding is a little bit hard to get from the drawings as they're drawn, in my opinion. And I feel like we don't know what it's going to look like when you come on the Block Island Sound and how it's gonna sit on the horizon, like from the beach looking up at the bluffs. I recognize it'll be the same as demonstrated in the drawings, but potentially there are locations coming down Coast Garden Road. You're gonna see that pool house in a way you don't see the house now. And it is charming and well designed, but I just, again, it's just my concern that it's hard to tell what it's gonna look like in the end, three-dimensionally.
Yep.
I think considering the extent, the extravagant model that we have built, it might be nice to see a few more views that show the scale from different locations compared to what's existing.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, because, you know, because the main house is on top of the hill and then this large wing comes down on the south side, that wing does look very large. And to me, and I think the plan is appropriate and attractive, and I just feel like, and thank you for showing us how working within those new limits we put in, you still can have a very significant piece of property and but it's still the wing and maybe even the pool house still just feel a little imposing. I guess more the wing was my concern on the height, and I just think it's a lot of impact and resources with the water usage, that, you know, if something happens with the neighbor's wells, is that going to be addressed? Is there going to be an understanding that if you're affecting your neighbor's wells, that you have to cut back or something? It just seems like a lot of impact to me.
We'll just say from a landscape standpoint, the further the south side and the eastern side, which is the view in question, the tree height is quite higher. It's mostly shrub out here by the coastal feature. And as you get in towards the richer loamy soils, which we have on a soil map, the trees are actually quite tall. So we are working to preserve this whole buffer so that the view coming from this direction is really not going to be impacted.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your images here, but so this it clearly has that south wing, yeah, is exposed, and this, yeah.
This is one thing we can also mention for the zoning board that they can request if they want to.
Yeah.
At this point. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, I understand that one.
God, yeah, I'm Carol Anderson and my husband Lyle is with me and we too are neighbors of the Hills. Appreciate the opportunity to address you all, and there's much to love about what's been proposed. Even learned a lot more today. Beautiful, beautiful setting, beautiful accoutrements in terms of the landscaping and all of that. But I think that Lyle and I have a concern just about the mass and the impact. It's our understanding of this whole section 406 that the living area, for instance, is over 6,000 square feet with 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms. The pool house is very sizable in its own right, and it's a new structure, not there now, so that's like an add. And if we interpreted what we were given correctly, it looks like it's 50% above the footprint set forth in 406, which would bring it before you guys for consideration. So riffing off of what Diane said, Lyle and I have the same thought about perhaps 3D models or something that would give you a better sense of what this is going to look like once it's completely constructed. It's very tough to tell from what we've seen on sort of one-dimensional plans what that's going to look like. I think that all of the view sheds haven't been considered. Some have been, where they've been portrayed about everything looks very similar, but I would respectfully request that's not true from all angles. A couple of things that were said here today, which kind of make that point for me, I think. Mr. Principe said that, quote, these buildings are clustered together and the pool and terrace are hidden from the neighbors. I would agree with the pool and terrace. I think it's also fair to say that the main house, the new pool house, the increase in scale, the living space and the height are clearly not hidden from neighbors. So I think that's something to consider. Mr. Schofield said it's, quote, nestled into the site. But I would suggest that that's not exactly true if we were to see a 3D rendering. And Rich had actually shared with us the concern that he had as a previous neighbor that his views were impacted. I think there are some people in the neighborhood, and it would be disingenuous to say that's not us as well, whose views will be impacted by the scale of it, by the height. I understand the height is below limit, but when you entertain that on top of a building that's on top of a hill, it will completely impact the view of the horizon and things of that nature. So what our request is of the board is that we consider some more 3D renderings or a better sense of what it's going to look like and how it's sited on that hill once built. Because we're just struggling as neophytes at this in terms of architecture, struggling envisioning exactly what it's going to look like.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
I have one thing on, I took a photo this morning on the park which favor the height. I'll give this to you, but basically what it shows is that we have an unobstructed view of the horizon. And this is the current house. And with it looks like when we build it, is that this whole section is going to be obstructed. So we're gonna have a piece over here and a piece over here, but not this beautiful view of the coastline that we used to have, that we always enjoyed from upstairs. Downstairs doesn't matter, we can't see anything anyhow. The second point to the landscape arguments, yes, these are the tallest trees, but they're almost the lowest part of the property. So they don't obscure the construction or the building, at least in my mind. But as Carol and Diana said, I think having more renderings from kind of our points of view, seeing it from architecture, which are totally left out of all the plans, would really help. That take my opinion and either true or false. And I will say it's a beautiful, beautiful design, but I just question, the scale for this property, and one that has a lot of history. So among the residents down on the Coast Guard Road or Champlain's Road. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you had your hand up.
Three quick questions. My name's Pete Tweedy. I'm a neighbor. First off, can you tell me what the roof covering is going to be on the house?
Yeah, zinc.
Sorry?
Zinc. It's the metal roof, zinc.
Okay, it is. Cool. Second question, can you give me an idea what the time frame is for starting the demolition?
This all goes well. We were hoping May or June.
Right when my tenants move in.
Better than you.
And my last question is, when you start the demolition, I assume you're going to use mats to cover up the explosions?
Yeah.
All right, other questions or comments? Last chance for the board, anything else that you want to discuss? Question?
If you're gonna ask for any additional information, you would want to leave the public hearing open.
Because I was like to say, if we decide to do what the 3D renderings, I want to leave the public hearing open. I don't want to close it.
Oh, okay. I was going to suggest that the zoning board has to that.
I think the ordinance is written where you can left it to the planning board.
But not the zoning board?
Front of me, but
Okay.
We can present a 3D rendering to the zoning board, if that's what you suggest.
you need it to make your recommendation.
I'm not interested in 3D rendering, but I think if they're gonna go to zone it, it would be behoove them to have what you have on. They are 2.0 at the very end from Charles Beach. More than one vantage point. to the point of the neighbors, but also Coast Guard Road. Just, so everybody can wrap their head around it. I don't need a 3D render around my head around it, but, I think it would be helpful. to Get rid of zoning so they can see. If that's possible. I think you have to actually access that property, probably get a photograph and then do computer renderings, you know, et cetera. So hopefully we'll get the access properly.
Didn't I hear you say that you did have some 3D, you had a 3D model that you were working with?
Correct, we do all our drafting and modeling in a three-dimensional program, but that's a sort of construction document tool to take that to the next level, to do renderings and, you know, Photoshop.
So it's not a physical 3D, it's a,
Computer.
yeah, it's good, okay.
And I will say what computers are terrible at doing is depicting existing trees, in straight lines.
Mhm.
Existing beautiful trees that cannot.
I have one more thing.
Thank you.
Just quickly, I actually was thinking the same thing. Why would we waive this type of requirement? But then I felt after the presentation and after my own review that I had enough information. And I do understand, I think you're gonna see a change in view in your view shed for sure. But I'm grateful that it's not all very large, big boxes. I think we can come across some designs that are so much harder to approve, in my opinion. I mean, I know designs are all a matter of opinion, but I feel like they've done a beautiful job presenting a project that's not maximizing on every square inch. And we do see that where people maximize on every square inch that they're allowed to utilize, and then ask for the special uses for it. So I'm happy with what's been presented, but I'll certainly listen to everyone on the board and decide accordingly. And maybe that is a solution, is to have these renderings for the zoning board
That
that'll
was
help
my
them.
suggestion, as we do it.
Yeah.
We have when Allison writes this up, we give us some findings and the recommendations. And one of the things we can do is I recommend that we have 3D drawings for the zoning board to use when this is presented. Because I think I have enough information to give a favorable review at this point, but I certainly want to make sure that all aspects are given to the zoning board so they have plenty of material to work from.
Margie, what would the zoning board do with it? I mean, we can make recommendations on visual impact, and zoning board is also making recommendations on visual impact, or is it just a zoning regulations interpretation?
Well, you're in.
I'm gonna turn that over to Allison because she's the expert, not me.
So in section 501, the standards that you're looking at would include traffic, emergency access, soil suitability, drainage, stormwater runoff, waste disposal, nutrient holding, soil erosion, utilities, natural resources, cultural assets, water protection, or WPS. So all of those areas falls within the planning board's review and development plan review application. Not just the aesthetics. And I understand that this application is focused on because of the scale and massing of the property. So we would weigh in on that.
And then they also weigh in on section 406. That's the advisory part of this application. So you're looking at two different parts to the application.
So could we say, ask for the 3D modeling for zoning and that the neighbors' concerns be with that new information that they with zoning, or is that our job to do?
I guess the answer is if you want to make sure we can request it, we cannot force zoning to do it. We don't have that. We're an advisory board, but we can certainly make recommendations that they take a look at it. If you want to make sure that they have it, then we need to hold the hearing open and request it, and they can come to the next board meeting and present it.
And you do have a meeting April 13th.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have another one in 2
And
weeks.
the L application is for zoning April 22nd.
And neither the Elds nor their architects can be here on April 13th.
Well, then it would be May. There. Scroll it over, so until the May meeting. That's up to you. Need that information in order to render your advisory.
I don't think I need it, but
I don't need 3D modeling, I just think I think it would be beneficial for the applicants moving forward though to have whatever type of rendering, just so, I mean, because the visual part of it, when you look at the architecture, look at the color choices, material choices, and regardless, like, it's going to impact a view shed. That's just a fact, but to what degree? And this had the potential to impact view sheds quite a bit, and I was very happy to see that it was actually, you know, what I would call very reasonable and scaled back. And it looks better than what was there.
Well, that's an
I mean, I don't mean any offense. Scott, you didn't build that.
I think it's
Even more than
So, I mean, for my discipline, I don't get a 3D rendering, but I think it would be helpful moving forward to at least have more than just this one point of view. You know, this POV on AR 20 or AR 2.0 from Charleston Beach. When I look at that, like I said earlier, the first thing that sticks out is it actually blends in better than what was there, because there's just no white. It sounds weird, but it's just, that's what seems to stick out when I see.
And style and design and,
yeah,
as a box.
Can I just, Joe, do you have a set of architectural plans stamped by a Rhode Island architect?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
You have one more question?
Just, yeah, I think to follow up on what gentleman before I said it, I think, Chris, sorry, Diane, is to clarify, I think it's the side-by-side comparison, to just, I think that's really valuable, especially to a layperson, to understand from even taking the views that are already drawn by the architect and potentially getting the camera on the field and duplicating what are we seeing right now from that point of view, which is, you know, I think that would go a long way toward helping understand the scale change existing.
So do you mean expound on this overlay?
No.
Taking the there are 7 3-dimensional views included in the package. One of them has the side by side on the beach, but the other 6 don't. So I wondered just even to have a side by side to try and determine where that view is taken, that 3-dimensional render drawing, go take a picture of it and just put it side by side. So you can just have a sense of, okay, that's the existing versus the new. I think it'll help understand the volume.
We could request that for the zoning board.
Yeah, I just think that would be helpful.
Okay.
We can prepare that.
Okay.
We will.
We will request it and you will prepare it.
It's important to know for the board and obviously for the public on, you know, our existing proposed conditions from a site plan. We're just the civil engineers, we're not the architect, we don't work in elevation. But again, they work off of our stuff. So it is important to know that, you know, we were definitely sensitive to the size and scaling. And we did not maximize any of the setbacks or anything, as you can see this evening. But one of the things to point out is not only is the new house in the same location, but the actual footprint itself, when we look at the existing footprint, we're actually our proposed footprint is only 500 square feet larger than the existing. So as far as our end is concerned on the civil site, the layout footprint, maybe living space could be much larger, but what we're saying is the actual footprint of the building itself is only 500 square feet bigger than that principal structure. So that's not much, 500 square feet, very small.
No, I agree. I think from a plan point of view, there's been a lot of sensitivity. It's just a concern, I think, the 3 dimensions is a little.
We can request that for the zoning, absolutely.
I guess along those lines too, I just want to clarify, does the zoning board as well as you have the authority to designate the appropriateness of the design under 406? I mean, is that something, because I'm just concerned if you were to close it now, is that
One of the principal criteria that the zoning board will consider is under section 401A and 401B, I think, and that is the appropriateness of the site for the neighborhood. So those are two two of the, and the appropriateness of the materials and the location. And those are both set forth in section 401 of the zoning ordinance, not of the planning board ordinance.
Therefore, it's a determination that happens at those levels. So,
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just a quick one. I think it would be great if they could get access to our property, take a photo, do the equivalent of what they did on the beach side sooner rather than later. Because I think we better go on the zoning board with our support rather than less. So just, I'm surprised it wasn't done. In fact, very surprised.
But you will allow us access, I think.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Beware the Yorkie now. He's not. Yorkie.
All right. One last chance. Any other questions or comments before I close the hearing? Okay, then I'll make a motion.
I got one comment.
Oh, sorry, go right ahead.
Just a comment. So, first of all, thank you for your input. I do want you to know, I think we have really taken all the regulations and the ordinances and thought quite carefully about how we wanted to place it. In fact, I would say at first, I was like, wow, these ordinances are interesting. But what it forced us to do was break up into separate homes or buildings, so that it was not a bigger building. So I thought the ordinance was actually very good from that standpoint. It made us redesign and rethink them. And secondly, I want to reemphasize that we're using the topography as best we can. And we'll give you those shots, but there will be some. And I will tell you, we've been very sensitive to that approach. To say, to make sure that the neighbors can see what they see today. If there is blockage, that it's reduced to the extent that we can make it. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. All right, I make a motion that the hearing be closed. Do I have a second? Chris seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. As far as findings go, Allison will write up a memo for us, which draft version, and we will take a look at it, make any corrections and so forth. And once we approve it, which will be in 2 weeks, we will get a copy of all that through Jen and your team here. So that's the process. Allison, do you have any questions for us as far as material that we want to have included in your memo?
Is there anything you want to include within, like first, making sure we take kind of go on consensus, but also any recommendations, specific recommendations or conditions, things like that. We talked about the renderings.
Yeah.
Anything additional that we haven't discussed during the meeting? Anything to include the findings that can.
I want to make sure that we put some emphasis on getting the 3D comparison drawings. And I also want to make sure that we have all the information that we need to understand how the stone wall works. Because that was a little retaining wall, thank you.
So I think updating the application with that information, we have to make sure it's clear to the zoning board that that's part of the special use permit. And also, one thing to note, like the change in the added dormers that modified the cubic calculation. So again, I mentioned this last meeting, but just ensure those calculations are accurate. You're really close to a prohibited level, like 8 feet off. So we don't want to see that happen after the fact. So let's just make sure those calculations are as detailed as possible for the zoning board and that you're under the prohibited levels and update that change so that it's within the application files, the correct totals.
I think it would be helpful to submit that information for the zoning board at least 10 days prior to the meeting.
We'll submit that in the next,
break
we'll
down.
submit that within the next week.
Okay. Even looking at it, it looks like the length is over 75 feet, but.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we have looking at that because there are some very specific regulations on that.
Because things are connected.
Yeah, we've been through that quite carefully, but we can do a breakdown for you.
Okay, good. We're gonna have a mistake, we want to catch it now, not later. Okay, and what we would do, certainly talk about the fact that they've done an extensive presentation. We like the materials that have been selected, that is, they've been sensitive to the neighborhood. so forth and so on. Anything you three want to be sure she has in the memo?
Just the point of view renderings.
All right, well, thank you all very much, and thank you for the presentation. Excellent as always.
Thank you for your consideration.
I'm gonna jump to You're the one who has to choose for. Well, you have to say, let me first.
Sorry, jump to number 7.
Do we have to get a opinion from?
You have a draft.
We have a draft, which I have somewhere, and I can't find mine.
First, we need to ask Mr. Landry
That's what
if the board can vote with only 3 members sitting.
We would like to ask, can you hear you? Gail has to recuse herself.
Correct, I do that.
And as a result, we have. We have a quorum, but then Gail has to recuse herself, so we're asking the lawyer, and if he says no, then we'll just roll you over. We have another meeting in 2 weeks. We have a draft.
Hold up the next stage.
I don't think that holds up anything. I don't think it impacts anybody. But just because we need to follow all the rules, there, I think we're, is Matt checking?
Yeah, I can answer that, Madam Chair. So section 504 of your regulations requires any affirmative votes by the planning board for the approval of a subdivision application or a land development application to be by a majority of the board and its total membership. So however many members of the board total there needs to be a majority vote of that membership in order to vote in favor. And that's in section 504, as well as the Development Review Act.
Okay, thank you. That means we will see the Phalens again in 2 weeks. So it's the 13th. I'm sorry, but people are out of town and sick, and there's a death in the family. So, you know, everybody has logical, good reasons for not being here. That's fine. That's fine. We don't, actually, you don't have to be here at all, but we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you. How do I say that nicely? You don't have to be here. As I said, the draft is done. We're ready to go. I don't see any, and looking at it, I don't foresee any problems. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for moving us up.
Yes. Go home and enjoy. All right. That's where, okay, number 5. Flower and Spade. Plat 2, lot 32, request for a Mylar to be signed off as a subdivision is not required.
And in fact, we don't have anyone here representing Flower and Spade. And Mr. Landry is recused from this.
Okay.
So.
I
Do you want to explain this one? So typically, we've talked about in the past, typically a Mylar sign off and just, you know, sign up administratively and be recorded. And we've talked about not having them go on the board agenda, but sometimes there are some things that maybe general prefer that you see because they're, you know, unique situation. So this one, how it came in, it looks like a subdivision because on the town record, I see 1 lot, but this is showing subdivision line through the middle. It's
it's not showing that, it's showing a lot line and there's name labels, right? So, Jen did, show that Mark Tilson had issued a zoning certificate.
Yeah,
saying
June
that-
2020.
Okay, a couple years back, saying it is a legal lot, so, but it's not something that we had in the GIS or, it's not on the tax assessor's flat maps. So,
Well,
there was one question came up about, footpath, there's an easement on the property. Oh, are you here to speak on that? Okay. So, I know, well, Joe Priestley came in today saying that the land trust want to make sure that footpath and the reference to the deed on that footpath was there, so we, reviewed that this afternoon and was, satisfied with the plan and the reference to the deed for that easement.
And that isn't part of our jurisdiction to decide the accuracy of that, is it?
No, but,
I mean, would that be a civil matter, not a?
right.
If there was
So
a
if it's
dispute, that's a
surveyor-
court matter, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
because it was raised, I just want to let you know that it was
Yeah.
addressed, so
Right.
that.
Make it- yeah.
Yeah.
we just, what we do is try to make sure that everything is accurately on the Mylar.
Okay.
So, and that's properly labeled and whatever.
Well, we want
Gotcha.
to make sure, I guess, like you said, we're not gonna question what the license services and surveyor, but we want to make sure that something doesn't get recorded that's not a subdivision. That's kind of why we're doing it. You're signing off saying this isn't a subdivision, but in this case, it looks like a subdivision because our town records don't show that those lots are subdivided. So I guess we would still continue with signing off the Mylar to be recorded, and the town records will have to be updated accordingly, the tax assessments, the plat maps, because the town has already issued a zoning certificate on
Right.
that.
And as long as you're comfortable with the language in the zoning certificate and what is being presented, you could, if you feel that it is, it should be an administrative subdivision, the applicant could, be advised to file an administrative subdivision. But
Well,
but it's not even that either, because an administrative subdivision, you're not creating a new lot, this
Right.
is technically
They have old deeds.
a new lot, but it is.
Because
I
they
think
have,
more this is a correction of a mistake. That's how I look at it.
That's,
Well, I don't think
that is
that's what
my
happened, no.
understanding, but
there was a time when lot lines were merged inadvertently or
Yes.
purposely by the tax assessor when two lots were owned contiguous to one another by in the same name. And at one point, there was discussion about merging lots that were in the same name. And so some owners actually purposely merged their lots. Some did not. They just got merged. We've come across this quite a bit.
Well,
If we
I'd
didn't
just
have the
like to-
zoning certificate, I think we'd want to do more investigation, but
Well, yeah, when I didn't know about the zoning certificate, and that's why I questioned this, and was like, well, they can't have that line down the middle, it's the same as the parcel lines,
And the line-
learning more about the background.
and the line looks like a stone wall, so then it's.
And it is,
it's
literally.
really two lots or, but I didn't see anything in any of the files that, looked like there was any kind of merger or it was.
I did,
any-
because they put all the deed numbers on here for these, I did look that up and it said that it saw that as one lot because it said in the event that they might need a larger road for a subdivision, then the road could be widened, basically. So it's basically acknowledging that it wasn't subdivided. It could be subdivided. I have no problem with it being subdivided, but it does need a proper road. It is a subdivision.
unless they were referring to one of the two lots being subdivided. I mean, I'm not
No.
vying for them in any manner, but
That's
that's another way of
That
interpreting
was in
that
the
language.
deed, in the, that's book 41, page 279, 1975. And
75, and it references the
which lot.
It references the right of way and it says that if the lot is subdivided, that they could make that right of way wider to fit subdivision regulations. So it's acknowledging that it was one lot that could become two lots. And I don't see why it can't be two lots.
Did you do
But-
the meets and bounds or to make sure it was the whole thing? See, that's right,
Yeah.
that's not our jurisdiction.
But I'm
I
just
thought-
saying, like, and I have other problems with this map because I don't think we should be recording things that aren't relevant to it, like all these footpaths. Unless they are the right of way, unless they're a right of way, and that's, I think,
That's my understanding.
They're written in the
They
deeds,
are
yeah.
not in the deeds and,
these are all right of ways, these footpaths, all this. like,
Well,
we
right
don't
of
know
way.
that for sure.
Like,
it sounds like they're easements, not really like a.
Unless they're physical footpaths that were determined to be easements or rights of ways are just physical and recorded because they were written, that's where I question. And I think I questioned this at another map that we were approving because I said, what is our jurisdiction? Are we the ones who are supposed to check the deeds to make sure that we can approve this? We're just a conduit, it seems.
Well, so typically, yeah, you're signing off that it's not a subdivision. So typically you wouldn't be analyzing accuracy. You're not gonna check like the measurements that they're right, because it's done by a professional land surveyor, but you're making sure it's not a subdivision. So in this case, it's like this gray area here because there's some inconsistencies with the maps, but the zoning official had issued that, but now it's in your intention to cut it complete, but I don't have information on that.
yeah, I just, it's because they put the deed number on there, so.
Right, I mean, I could do the, we'll do, right, I mean, yes, but Mark did research and wrote this.
Zoning
Zoning
certificate.
certificate based on research. I could reach out to, Catherine Marola, who's the other town solicitor, who wouldn't be recused on this if you wanted to ask any specific questions or ask her to review it. You know,
Well, I wish the
this is-
applicant was here, but I think in terms of signing off on a Mylar, you know, I understand that it's like a rubber stamp. But if that's the one thing is about the subdivision piece, I think it's unclear, but the other piece is that this email we got today about a right of way, I don't see that depicted on this map. And so if there's inaccuracies on this map, then I'm not comfortable like giving it my rubber stamp.
Do you want to ask if there's any questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you shed any light on this?
Sure.
Thank you.
My name is William Netching, and I live in 734 Corn Road, the former in-law home.
Oh, yes, yes.
We bought the residence and the land in 2010. And part of our deed and part of the reason for us to buy the property was that it was represented to us both by the seller, by the title insurance company, and on our deed that we have a right of way to West Beach. When we bought the house, we were told that the right of way was to go down the formerly Rowan ROWAN property and go in there, and that there was a path that was maintained by Mr. Rowan for many decades. And that path led you to now the Conservancy fields that go down, and then you can go down the Conservancy down to West Road. It was represented to us as seaweed rights that were created in the 1800s for the farmers. And there was several roads that run down to the water on either side of Middle Pond. So we've been using that road, that right of way, as our right to pass for 12 years.
Could you show on the map, did it show? Like I see this access even to the West Beach. Where do you come in? Where do you?
Yes, because there's paths going through it, paths going to the south of it,
Yes.
or along the south.
There's been paths in there for
Because there's part of it, you go over Hodge and then you break in and go along the southern boundary of the North Long Lot. And now there's cut kind of right through the middle of it.
Right, and if you go straight down the Hodge,
Mhm.
obviously you come to the middle pond, you can't get to West Beach. So the way the path is represented to us is that you come out of our driveway, you make a right hand turn, and you make a hard left. And there's a road that comes up, that's on the Rowan property,
Mhm.
comes across, intersects Hornet, and then goes up and continues all the way up towards the maze.
Oh, it goes that way?
Yeah, it runs like diagonally through, and then there was a cutoff to the right, and there's footpaths that have been.
Yeah, that's not showing here.
That go down to the corner, and I'm just trying to figure out.
I thought, can I have a look?
Yeah.
Sure, I thought
Village
yours.
shows access even West Beach, so I wonder if it's.
See, here's where you would come in. And I thought yours was along here and along here, but I never legally tried to figure it out. But it seemed like it went along Hodge, broke in here, and went along the southern boundary of this.
Yeah, the
And then
footpath,
along here and
Here's the-
down.
here's the footpath that we were shown, right here,
Gotcha.
here,
Yep.
here,
Oh,
and all through here.
Mhm.
And this was all maintained by
Yes.
Mr. Rowan, and that takes you to get the corner, and I think this is town property,
Mhm.
and then you come into this corner, and then you go down through the fields past Goldman's house,
All along Bridge.
next to Goldman's house down to the water.
So it is shown on here?
Yeah.
it's
this
just a
is-
footpath.
see
It doesn't
here?
say it's a right away.
Well, it says about, see, access even to the West Beach, is that part of the same?
Yeah, I mean,
That's part of the same path, it's just a label.
right.
You wanna make sure
Right,
that.
so for practical purposes, and when I've talked to people in historical society and other people that are old timers here, it was about the farmers bringing the seaweed up to fertilize the
exactly,
fields,
yeah.
right? So you wouldn't go like around a corner and go down to with your wagon to go get seaweed. So it made practical sense that they would come down through here and then go down to the beach, because you're on the other side of Middle Pond. Middle Pond ends over here, and you come off the north side of Middle Pond. So we were told to use this path as our right of way, as part of our deed, and come up here. And that's pretty much the path that Mr. Rowan maintained. I assume it was Mr. Rowan, I don't know.
Yeah, the Rowans did maintain that for a long time.
And that, yeah, that's our path right there.
Mhm.
So if you wanna check that, pull that, make sure you have that, you can probably get this online, that document, that's the book and page.
Okay.
Always have that on your file.
Yeah.
If any questions ever come up in the future, you have the actual legal document.
Yeah, because I think this is the garage on the road.
Yeah, it's right here, exactly. Here's their house.
And here's Quantic Road. Yeah, you go
Yeah.
down this, and then there's another gravel way this way.
This is the old Atwood. wall.
Yes, and then if you, this gravel way here totally lines up and goes all the way out past McGarry's.
Right.
And all the way out towards, I think, Smith and the maze.
Mhm.
So it all it makes sense, logical sense, that if the farmers were coming down here trying to get to the beach, they would come down here, go on the other side of Middle Pond, which is over here.
Mhm. And go to Mill Pond for Pete too.
Yeah.
But I think, I guess back to our
normal policy is that we have somebody here to speak, either a lawyer or a family member or the owner. So we could roll this over until April and request that there be somebody here to go over this with us. I think what you said is, it makes clear, very good sense. And I don't know your part of the island nearly as well, so I'm going with what Gail is going. If she says that works, that's enough for me. So,
Well, like I said, I'm not,
Do you have concerns with this plan now?
I mean,
so we just-
What I just outlined.
I certainly am not, I don't have a jurisdiction to say that's it. You know, it's just, those are physically there.
And you have concerns with this whole idea of.
what I'm saying is, if you're not happy with this, we want to talk to the owner, or owner's representative.
My only
We
question.
can roll it over.
was-
Be sure.
I think we need to.
If it's happy,
I thought we had enough information with the zoning certificate.
Well, that's my question.
Can we, let me, Mark, I think we need to have one conversation.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is-
that's probably true.
Yes.
So I believe the neighbor's concerned about this, making sure this is shown as an easement is addressed. It's access easement to West Beach, the deed is referenced here, and the path is shown on the plan, the Buckeye Land Trust path that they confirmed is on here. And again, we don't like typically get into that with.
We can't prove that that's.
Right, just because you sign off, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
No, it means it goes to court if there's a,
So you would, even if
Contact
it wasn't on
agreement.
here, you would still have, that easement would still exist. What the planning board has to be checking exclusively is just that you're not recording, the administrative officer is not recording. Jen doesn't wanna sign on something that's a subdivision. So we'll just check with, if you feel, because there's maybe some question marks, we can
Well,
check
it's
with legal
only if-
before you sign on.
Right.
What are the question
Have
marks is the question.
Or not, I mean, we have a zoning certificate,
I mean, I saw the zoning certificate, and I was ready to sign off on it.
right, the two lots.
I understand that we can approve this and then the neighbors go to court and figure it out, but couldn't we?
Are there any, like, who is?
What I'm going to say is that, wouldn't it be better if they, if this could just be confirmed and that there's an agreement that this is a right of way that is apparent with property, and then have that all settled before we sign off on it, and then they don't have to go to court.
But is that our jurisdiction is my question. I keep going back to that, but.
The easements are shown on here, I don't, what's the?
It doesn't
There's
say it's
no
an
story
easement,
here.
it just says it's a footpath, it doesn't
It
say
says
that,
access easement to the West Beach, CD book 29, page 350.
that's just from this lot, it's actually not even for this lot, it's for the El Salvador lot, but that's not,
You don't think that's the same easement?
it is an easement to the beach that they've been using, but that's not what our friend here is saying, that he's got it right away across the property.
But he's confirming that it is physically here.
Yeah, but it's not marked as a right of way, and that does make a difference. if
It
it's
says a
going to be
footpath.
developed. Yeah, but it's not marked as a right of way.
But is that our job to make sure that these things are written correctly?
Sometimes we see two different things, you either see boundaries, just the boundary survey without the rights of way, without the footpaths, without structures and then you also see more of a site plan showing the location of the dwelling and all of the easements that are on it, so if you're.
I remember what it was. We were told not to focus on those kind of details on a particular map that actually had a town, he had a lot line change on his map, and that's why we couldn't approve that one.
Yeah, so that's
And that was a whole different ballgame, but I think we were told at that meeting that we couldn't digest all the other particulars of it.
Right, but because.
I'm just trying to
because
figure it all out, because I'm
they're
relatively
shown-
new.
Because they're shown, I think it's either they're all shown and clearly identified, or they're all removed from the plan. It seems like you're feeling like it's kind of part of some of that, and maybe not clearly labeled.
I'm trying to digest whether it's our jurisdiction to determine and read a deed to determine whether it's one lot or two. I thought that was left to the.
Well, that is the zoning.
The zoning
so
certificate.
That's what the zoning
Yes.
certificate does.
Right.
So what's in question is easements and footpaths.
And I keep going back to that, is it our jurisdiction to question easements and footpaths?
No, I don't think it is.
All I'm
I'm just
saying
trying to
is,
divide
I'm not
what our
making,
job is. 'cause-
Gail, I'm not saying we make a decision about that. I'm just saying that if there's any question, those questions be resolved. Before
what's the
we enter
question?
it into a record, and then it has to escalate to get resolved.
But if there's other records that don't have easements and footpaths on them,
Actually, there is a
either.
map that has a right of way going diagonally across that lot.
so basically, it didn't have anything on here,
We just approved it.
we just approved it. But
If we didn't know.
If it didn't have the zoning certificate attached to it, I would have signed it and recorded.
Oh, you would?
If the zoning certificate wasn't included, because it is a little bit of a unique.
So the zoning certificate doesn't give you the information that makes you comfortable knowing this was investigated?
No, it does. I'm
Yeah.
saying you wouldn't see it. I would have just signed it internally and recorded it.
Oh, okay,
If he didn't have this other part to it, with the zoning certificate.
okay.
Well, I have no problem with it being 2 lots. I'm just saying that, Gail knows some things about this property and that, and I had seen a previous map where there was, I think it's on the town map right now, there's a right of way diagonally across that lot.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Mhm.
Right, so that's one thing you would look, like, if it's in conflict with what the town has, then why is it in conflict? You looked at that in the past. I mean, this is a conflict because it shows it as 1 lot and you're looking at it as 2 lots, with a zoning certificate establishing 2 lots. So it's the same.
I'm pretty sure that that property just sold, I'm very sure that sold as 1 lot recently.
So it's
Well,
up to you if you.
Well, I won't even comment on that because it's not part of this meeting, but I think, I'm just trying to determine what our job is. If I were,
Our job
with
is
the
to make sure
knowledge
it's
that
not
I
a
have,
subdivision.
I would,
Basically, our job is to make sure it's not a subdivision, and that's it.
yeah.
And
It
then,
says, so what the stamp is, planning board approval not required. So you're not
Yes.
approving, reviewing, signing off on anything. Well, you're saying that if the plan doesn't require, to be recorded, it doesn't require planning. board
Correct.
approval. That's the stamp, that's the decision.
And that was the question, because
This is looking like a subdivision,
Right.
so we were saying, well, no, that can't be
But this is the
recorded.
problem I have, if it looks like a subdivision, and substantiate that it is, but you can't. Like, neither one of you can say that it is a subdivision because it has a zoning certificate, so why are we seeing it?
Yeah,
Right,
Like, I'm confused.
that's my
This is
point.
what I'm
that's
getting
why,
at.
yeah,
I'm like thoroughly baffled, like,
I think Jen wants another set of eyes to look at this, that's why.
but,
in the past, you've always
yeah, like the Mylar,
signed
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Mylar.
But I thought we all agreed that we're not gonna do that anymore because it's not necessary.
But this one, unless it's something that's unique, like the painting.
But it's not my jurisdiction to say the zoning certificate's void because we don't agree with it.
Yeah, but we're not saying that.
So
You're
what,
just
Nobody's
looking
saying
at
that.
it, you're not taking a vote on it, you're.
I mean,
Yeah, we don't take a vote.
yeah, it's just,
So we're not questioning your rights,
Yeah, we're just.
and we're not trying to delete them or add them. We're just trying to define whether we can,
well, this can be recorded.
this can be recorded.
and to Christine's point, like, we want to avoid something happening, well, actually, we don't, like, how are we gonna avoid it if we don't, like, let them figure it out? Meaning the property owners, I don't know what to figure out for.
Right, they do.
Easements, footpaths, or any of it, like, I don't.
I agree, exactly.
I don't want, like, you follow what I'm saying, like, I don't have any information other than the zoning certificate, it looks like 2 lots correct to me, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest, like, the concern was
But
if
to
they were labeled correctly.
people that have
Tax
easements,
office, right?
like, it's not us to decide whether or not they do or don't, they have to look up, if they have concerns of whether or not it's recorded properly, then those are rightful concerns, and those need to be brought, I don't know, to whom, zoning again?
Well, if you were looking at a subdivision, you would want
Right.
all of those easements,
Right, but we're not.
any kind of right of way. You would want to see it. You're just looking, you're looking at it.
And if,
Not required, you're not taking a vote.
Like, are your concerns with what's on this, like, or, I guess I'm saying is, if you had concerns with what's written on this, what's the process?
A property owner's disputing that, not the board. For
I
a
mean-
situation like this,
It seems to me like all the different maps that I've seen with the different right of ways, the diagonal one and then this serendipitous one that we've been walking on. That looked to me like Mr. Roma probably didn't want the diagonal one cutting through the back of his property, and then he just created one that sort of satisfied the right of way
mhm.
and got people, you know, it's really exhausting walking through there. Of course, walking through there, but we got those people out of the way. View.
Mhm. Well, may I suggest, since there's nobody here to represent, you know, and that we table it, and then if you want to talk to your neighbors and they want to come to the next meeting.
And I'll ask the applicant to come.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As I said, normally we don't go forward with these without a person representing the family, either lawyer or family member or owner. Who makes a little presentation. And then we either agree or disagree as it goes. So we can do that for April 13th, I think it is.
April 13th.
Okay,
I just have one question, because it just came up in your conversations.
okay.
If I have, let's say, a 4-acre property, and I want to divide it into 2 2-acre properties, is that a subdivision, or what is that? If I say, don't mind,
Yeah.
which the only reason I'm saying that is because I know that property was sold as one lot. It was not sold as 2 pieces. So automatically just say, here it is. That would become a subdivision.
I don't know what to say on that, we have a real estate agent, but I mean, is it deeds, is it, you know, sometimes you can sell at one sale. Multiple
I'd have to look
lots.
at the recording to see if I know they proved that it was 2 lots before they closed. They came up with a determination. But I wasn't privy to either the seller or the buyer, so neither were my client or customer, so I don't really know at the end of the day how it was, and actually we could look up the recording to see how, you could look up to see how it was recorded.
If you look up the sales recording.
We
It
can't.
was all one, yeah.
I just really want to be on the record for our
Yeah.
language, of course, that's part of the value of
Yeah.
our home.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not really
And
in
if
our
this,
purview.
if this, yeah, if this gets recorded, it's to your favor, but
To
then
your favor.
proving that to the owners would be your next, if you have to, you know, I don't know if you've talked to them yet or anything.
Because then it's an issue of titles, as long as before we get it to wrong title. Right, it was our title, correct?
Right.
Those who represented this, we had right.
And that's begins to be a court issue, not a planning or zoning
Right.
issue. So
Yeah.
if you'd like to come
Thank
back
you.
in now, April, and see how we're doing.
We'll be back.
So you have the plan, so you do have this
I
plan.
don't have that.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Okay. That's the one that's on, what I'm saying.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it's the same one.
Right.
Are you going to this? So this is the. Yes, that is the same, that's the only plan that I have, so.
Wait till next one. Roll it over.
So
There's nobody here.
just for practicality, when we pass on this, like, how do you word that? We're passing because we have questions and there was no one to answer our questions?
You just table it till next month.
Those are-
Yeah, put it back on.
And the reasoning being we have questions.
You had questions and.
That no one could answer.
Policy is to have somebody, I mean, we don't always do it with the normal policy,
You want
is
to
to
look
have
at
a
that document,
representative
confirm that's
here who can answer
your
questions.
legal. You can.
Just trying to understand
I
it
say
all.
normal because that's what we usually do, there are some exceptions.
Yeah.
Over the years where we just go ahead without somebody here.
And 29,
Clearly,
115,
something that
Sure.
we all knew, or it was a hardship for the person to get here, they were, I forget what the reasons were.
Yeah.
Normal policies have something.
Because my initial instinct was to do, you didn't start looking at these and everything, but
All right,
that
let's,
wasn't our
let's take
jurisdiction.
number 6 and work that real quickly, and then I'm going to recommend that number 8 be done at the next meeting, since
No one's
that's a
here.
very involved thing, and they would, I think, prefer to be here for it. That's not good. Okay, since there's
You're going back to.
okay, going back to 6, which is for Milliken Trust. And I will make a motion to grant preliminary plan approval of a minor subdivision for property on Pilot Hill Road, plat 8, lot 194-2, fire number 1232. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, 15 seconds. I will go through and read very quickly, although you all have this in front of you, we don't have money. Unless it's.
Well, I mean, it's David.
Normally from the audience, I read this, but so.
I'll say.
Yeah. All right, here you want me to read, it's a page and a half, okay. The plan involves the subdivision of a lot located along Pilot Hill Road, with existing single-family residence. Lot 8, lot 194-2 was part of the subdivision recorded in 2013, and to be subdivided into 2 lots, creating 1 additional lot for development. The property is located in residential A zone district and is a total of 325,885 square feet, approximately 7.5 acres. As part of this decision, the board made the following positive findings regarding the proposal on standard listed on section 307. 1, the proposed subdivision is consistent with the comprehensive plan in the residential A zone district. The countryside and desired land use pattern is low density residential development served by narrow lanes integrated into an existing pattern of fields and stone walls. 2, the proposed subdivision is in compliance with standards and provisions of the town zoning ordinance. The proposed lot meets the minimum developable land area regulations as defined in the zoning ordinance. The lot developed with the existing single family structure, 194-2 will retain its over 200 feet of frontage along Pilot Hill Road. The lot for the development, the proposed lot -194-3 will be accessed from an existing 20 feet wide right of way off of Pilot Hill Road, recorded in 2017, and would have over 200 square feet of frontage along a private right of way. 3, there will be no significant negative environmental impacts from the proposed subdivision. The property has a significant amount of wetlands. Wetlands were delineated by Environmental in 2020. After subtracting areas occupied by wetlands, the following of the developable land areas of the 2 proposed lots. Proposed lot 194-2 equals 120,285 square feet, and proposed lot 194-3 equals 148,781 square feet. The applicant includes DEM verification of the delineated edge of freshwater wetlands present on the site, and requirement that existing cut and manicured paths be allowed to naturally revegetate. Any new development will be in compliance with DEM regarding regulations for setbacks and buffers at the time of application, and the lot can accommodate a minimum of 150 feet distance between the OWTS and the wetlands on site to be consistent with the new shore and current zoning regulations. 4, the subdivision will not result in the creation of lots with such physical constraints to development that building on these lots would be impractical. The subdivision lot includes a minimum of 120,000 square feet of upland area after deducting wetlands and easements serving other lots. The lots will be served by private well and individual WTS, and soil evaluations have been conducted and approved by DEM. Number 5, all subdivision lots have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street. The existing developed lot has access to Pilot Hill Road, and the lot for future development will be accessed from the existing 20-foot wide right of way off of Pilot Hill Road. 6, the project provides for safe circulation of vehicle traffic, adequate control of surface water runoff, suitable building sites, and the preservation of natural, historical, and cultural features. The project will meet town road construction standards to provide safe circulation of vehicle traffic. Plans roadway improvements with the 20 foot right of way were prepared by Seth Lemoyne. A cross-section detail shows the 10-foot wide gravel travelway with swales of 3 to 5 feet on both sides for drainage and a layoff for accommodating passing traffic. The roadway will potentially serve at least 3 residential properties. Road improvements will be constructed prior to final plan approval. 7, the finding that the design and location of streets, building lots, utilities, drainage improvements, or other improvements will not create flooding or soil erosion is subject to conditions set forth below. Refer to the letter by the town engineer dated 12/6/2000 to be corrected.
Good question.
Our recommendations, our conditions, since they're changing the plans for the electric right away, and why are they leaving the house site on there? Rather than, because this piece of paper doesn't necessarily go with that map.
Yeah, because didn't we
Yeah.
ask them to take the house off because we weren't approving a house site?
Well, the language there that, the land is provided, it says it's not. Mark, you just read it.
I know.
It's the first thing you saw here.
Gotcha.
The house site locations shown on the subdivision plan are demonstrative only and neither proposed by the applicant or approved by the planning board.
So this language should be on the map itself, or they should take the house site off the map. Just like they're adding to the map anyway for this electric service, the right of way. They could make that alteration as well. So I'm saying,
It says to add language to the plan, the easement, the everything.
yeah,
So, well, this is preliminary, so on the final plan, we could.
well, it's actually, it's an added, amending the easement, not the map, but yeah. So it's just that this document will never really follows the map. And so is there some way to delineate this piece? Yeah, like if somebody went into the vault and looked up that map, they wouldn't see this.
You mean they're not recorded together?
Yeah. You very rarely, you'd have to like really.
But are we gonna have a look at the map to make sure all that language is then, and that the corrections are made and the language is added about the site?
No, I think we're approving it tonight.
This is the preliminary, so it's.
Oh, it's the preliminary.
But there.
Yeah, there are a couple things that have to be on there before the final.
Want to put in your preliminary, you could have any number of things that
Keep coming up. Yeah.
are going to see in the final plan.
So that they have correction, so that the
Mhm.
final plan is
I thought we did that already. We didn't do that already? Go through all of our suggestions?
Well,
to
that's
what was-
what's
That's what this
drafted
is,
here.
that's what this is here.
Okay.
Christine's saying that,
Yeah.
put that, you wanna add a label to the site plan, the final site plan that's recorded about the house site not being approved.
Or just take it off.
Or just take it.
I think for some reason they wanted it on though. And so Bill Landry agreed that we could just add language to the map. So it's very clear when someone is reviewing the map that this is not
That's
the
not
approved
a
house site.
Yeah,
Let's modify the decision to where it says that language, say, add this note to the map.
add note to that. We could just add that at the end of that first sentence, number one. This must be added to the map.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
That'll do it.
work for me.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Because for other reasons, just taking the structure off just gives them work that they don't necessarily need to. They might place it back there again anyway, but at least
When they apply for the project. Yeah.
Well, like I said, by labeling it.
but
that
they
takes
will be
care of-
reminded that we never approved that site.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
Okay.
I, for some reason, thought we were seeing a new map tonight, but I forgot that we were just
This is
approving what we decided
Yeah,
last.
this is, all this is a draft of what we discussed the previous time.
I couldn't think of anything
But what
else.
I'm due before we vote on this, to approve it, is to make sure that there's nothing else we want to add or clarify, which is
Yeah.
exactly what Chris brought up, just some clarification.
Yeah, so that's why, we did the draft decision, so the planning board.
Because we read this and, all of a sudden something may jump out at you that, oh, we didn't really mean it that way. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Anything else? Then, okay, so I made a motion and it was seconded. Any more questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
You didn't add
We did add.
Yeah, they added.
Yeah, we did add on the, yeah. Okay. And we have to be out of here in about 10 minutes. We will start with number 8, which is the material on the Beach Avenue next month, which will be April 13th. And we'll have minutes next month also. So, anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Consider starting at 3. I know it's early, but we're gonna run into the same situation where
superintendent. The only thing is I mentioned today, I actually got someone for jury duty, unfortunately, April 13th and 14th. So I won't be able to, there's no way I can get here, in person, I'll join by Zoom.
I was gonna say, just